So I'm willing to admit that when I bought my 2007 Porsche Cayman, there's a few things that I didn't realize, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about them, but not embarrassed enough to not share them with you. And so here it goes. So the first time I drove this car home to my parents' house, I was going down the highway, and I was, it's a new Porsche. What are you going to do? Nobody's on the street, so I tried to go fast. As soon as I hit 85 miles an hour, the engine cut out on me as if I was hitting a rev limiter. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I pulled over, looked in the user manual. I discovered that on the onboard computer, you can change the maximum speed. And the dealership had set the max speed to 85 miles per hour, which is why I wasn't able to go over that. So I just put it up to the max, and I was able to go only slightly over 85 miles per hour. So the first time I took this car to get gas, I took a gamble, pulled up to the pump with the pump on the left side, and discovered that there's no filler cap here. So I was like, all right, I'll just go around and go on the other side. So I went around the other side, and then, oh wait, there's nothing here. And then I had to think to myself, and eventually I noticed, oh, there's the fuel filler cap. And that was pretty embarrassing because I'm sure somebody was watching me like, do you not know where the filler cap is on your own car? And yeah, so that was pretty embarrassing. Took me a second to realize that the filler cap and the gas tank are actually right here. Another embarrassing side note is that this is actually my second fuel filler cap because the first one I took off and I usually put it up here, but I guess I was in a rush or something and I left it there. So I closed it just like that, and then it fell off, and I was so embarrassed that I told the dealership someone stole it. Super useful feature I didn't realize until months after I bought this car was these cool little compartments right here under the armrests. I had no idea that you could open that. And I just end up using it for trash and stuff. But it's super useful, and both sides have it. And I guess you could put maps in there or sunglasses or whatever. But like I said, I just use it for trash. But it's a really cool feature. Another feature along those same lines that I didn't realize until a couple days after I bought it was these compartments. So these sort of saddlebag compartments, I guess you'd call them, are really useful too for holding small things like, for example, on this one I've got an umbrella, and then on the other one I have some like cleaning supplies, and that might be all in there. The key goes on the left. So if we go in here, then the keyhole is right here. Now, obviously I knew this when I bought the car because I test drove it, but it does take some getting used to. And the first few times that I got in this car in the morning, I would look over here and then have to switch hands and go over here. But now I'm just used to putting my key in my left hand and putting it right in there with my left hand, like that, turning the key, and using my right hand to lift the lever here, which is exactly what Porsche wants you to do because it's like in the old days when they raced in Le Mans and the drivers had to run up to their cars and start them before they went off. A couple of other things about this key. When I first got this car, I didn't realize that you have to press and hold the button for the trunk in the front or the trunk in the back in order to open it. You can't just press it like that. You have to press and hold before it'll open. Now this was a bit concerning when I brought my car home for the first time, and I kept pressing it and pressing it and pressing both trunk buttons, and nothing was happening. I was like, what the heck, is it broken? But then a friend of mine who is living in the same place that I was living was like, why don't you try holding it? Felt pretty dumb about that because it seems obvious now, but I didn't realize that at first. There's a lever here, so if you don't know it's there and you try to pull up the trunk, it's not going to work. You actually have to there's a lever right there. You have to grab that lever and pull to the right, and then it'll open. And the embarrassment doesn't end there, because when you close it, it's not actually closed all the way. You still have to press down on it in order to close it fully. Pro tip, press right on the badge and you won't smudge any of the paint around here. Another note on the trunks is that while there is a lot of volume, the volume is broken up in such a way that it's very difficult to fit a full-size suitcase in here. So a full-size suitcase has to go in the front seat, or else it's going to be crushed under the rear windscreen. And for example, if you put it up here, which is the only other place it might fit, it better not be very full, because it's going to get smushed. When you close the door, it's going to be pressing up against there, and then you won't be able to see out the rear of the car, which I'm not comfortable with, so if I have a full-size suitcase, I put it in the front. Another thing with the key is that, as you can see, there's only one button to lock and unlock the car. And that's odd. I've never seen that on any other car. Normally there's one for lock and one for unlock. See, nothing on this side. That's just a badge, not a button. And the other odd thing is that the only button in the entire cabin that controls the locks is right here. And once again, it locks and unlocks with the same button. Luckily, it lights up when you lock it. Unfortunately, mine is a bit broken right now. I'm going to see if I can fix that myself, and if not, I guess I'll have to take it to the dealership. But when it does work, it lights up when it's locked, and then you press it again to unlock. But it's a bit weird because I always have to check to make sure it's locked because I'm paranoid. If you're a dumbass like me, you can get your finger caught in the door while you're closing it. And the reason I say you have to be a dumbass like me is because I was so concerned about smudging the car that when I was closing the door, I was holding it here and closing it. And I didn't want to get any smudges here, so I was closing it from grabbing here, and I got my pinky stuck in there. And that's the result 2 weeks later. It's not pretty. I had to go to the emergency room because it was bleeding so much. So I did not realize how easy it is to actually do an oil change in this car. And that's a bit embarrassing because I spent over $200 on my first oil change, and then I saw a video of someone doing it themselves, and it was actually not that hard, and I was like, damn, I could have saved some money there. So that was legitimately embarrassing, and I think I might be doing my own oil changes from now on. So let's talk manual transmission. The gear ratios in this car are pretty tall, and they're tall enough that you actually need to take your foot off the gas for a little bit longer than at least what I'm normally accustomed to in order to rev match on upshifts. So what I always end up doing whenever I get back in this car after not driving it for a few days is I always end up having too many revs when I'm upshifting. It takes me a second to get used to it. And it's kind of embarrassing when you have someone in the passenger seat and it's pretty jerky when you're upshifting, because that's supposed to be the easy part. And but yeah, it just takes some getting used to, because I'm used to a bit shorter gears or a bit closer ratios where you don't need to drop the revs as much on the upshift. While we're talking about shifting, it's actually kind of embarrassing that I still haven't quite mastered heel towing in this car. I think the problem is that my feet are kind of small to begin with. I only wear a size 8.5. And then there's this bump here where the distance of my foot to the pedal is a bit shorter here than it is here. And I think the idea is that you're braking hard while you're on the track and then you can heel toe like that. But I typically don't have to brake that hard since I'm usually just driving around. So if I want to heel toe, I end up going like this and then slipping off a little bit, or I just miss the gas completely like that. But I suppose if I was on a track, it would be useful to be able to just slam on the brakes and then twist like that for your heel toe feature. But I haven't been on the track yet, so we'll have to see. So for the longest time, I just ignored this TP button. I didn't know what it meant, but I didn't really care. And finally, someone asked me about it, and I was like, you know what? I actually don't know. So once again, I went into the user manual and looked it up, and apparently this stands for traffic programming. And I guess in places like Germany or England, maybe, you have a traffic program that's specifically for traffic. It's in some sort of frequency on the radio that's just for traffic, and so this is a button that you press to get to that station. In this car, it just mutes the radio. The 2007 Porsche Cayman is in that awkward in-between years where there was no tape players anymore in cars, but audio jacks and USB jacks were still not quite being phased in yet. So what happens is this car, being a 2007, doesn't have any way to directly plug your music into the stereo. So I ended up having to buy this $50 charger / radio adapter, and it just plays on a frequency that you then have to tune into on the radio, and I have it preset in order to listen to music or podcasts or whatever you want to. Another embarrassing thing about this thing is that it does slowly but surely drain your battery. So I left this plugged in for 2 weeks while I was on vacation, and when I came back, the car was dead. And so you just got to make sure you unplug it before you leave, because it will supply power to it until it dies. Another thing that's maybe just a quirk, maybe not necessarily embarrassing, but it's weird that there's no direct tune feature. So if you know you want to go to a specific channel, then there's not like a tune button. This will just go to the next frequency that has a strong signal, or you push it and it'll scan for a stronger signal. But it's really hard to tune directly to a certain station. And I've looked at the user guide and the manual and stuff to try to figure out if there is a way, and I can't find it. And I've talked to people who own Porsches, and they weren't able to show me either. So if you guys know, let me know in the comments if you know how to tune directly to a radio station. One thing that I don't need to be embarrassed about that happens on some of the newer Porsches is a bunch of blank buttons. Now, I've seen in other 911s, and especially the Panamera, there's just a row of buttons where you could put options, but if you don't spec out all the options, you're going to have all these blank spots where buttons should be. I think Porsche did a good job of designing this head unit, or whatever you want to call it, without any blank buttons. One last thing I didn't realize about my particular Porsche is that apparently the right rear rim has a slight bend in it somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, but if you get over 70 miles per hour on the highway, then you feel a tiny bit of vibration. And also, if you leave the car sitting for long enough, then this tire slowly deflates. So like when I went on vacation for 2 weeks, this tire went from 30 psi down to like 19 or 20 psi without any temperature change. So I've got to always make sure that this is full. It's not dangerous. I've talked to the dealer about it. They're like, you'll be fine. But eventually I'm going to have to replace this rim because there's a slight bend in it, and it's confusing the TPMS sensor too. The TPMS sensor, for example, right now says I'm -7 under the recommended, but I'm actually only -1 when I do an actual tire pressure test. So, yep, a little embarrassing, but not a huge deal. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe.